Jayne, welcome to the Take Flight podcast.
Nice to see you, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you so much. I've been looking forward to this for a while. I wanted to speak to you for a long time.
Why's that?
A number of reasons, actually. I just admire you, generally speaking, but I actually also worked at one of the companies that you worked at and saw you speak, and I was just in awe of what you spoke about, and a lot of what you said resonated with me as well. So,
Which company was that, Mark?
at Salesforce.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
talk a bit about that, I'm sure.
Yeah. So ever since then, I actually immediately after hearing you talk, I wanted to reach out to you then, but for whatever reason I didn't. So yeah, I'm really pleased we're talking now anyway.
Great.
So I wanted to start with purpose. I want to start with talking generally about purpose. And this podcast is called Take Flight. It's about helping people to better understand what they might feel their purpose is at any particular time in life. It's also about performance. So we'll talk a little bit about that and how you get the most out of yourself and other people and even businesses. But I've heard you say that your life and in fact your career was a series of accidents. And I wonder whether you feel that you had a particular purpose or a North Star that guided you at times, or whether it was just sort of accidents as you call it.
I think I've always felt a sense of purpose, but the time that really sort of shone through for me was after I'd had my daughter. And we struggled to have, we only had one child, and we struggled to have her. My husband and I had been married for 19 years before she arrived, so she was something of a miracle. And of course, having got into a particular way of life by then, we just sort of assumed that you could have a baby and attach it to your life and carry on. And when she was finally born, and we decided that I would carry on at work because I was the main breadwinner, and my husband would give up work and stay at home, I found that very difficult to deal with. And I don't know if it triggered postnatal depression, but I certainly had postnatal depression. But I had to go back to work because otherwise we wouldn't have had any money, right? And lots of families are in that situation. And I remember going back to work at Virgin, as I was at the time in Norwich, and gathering together quite a big group of people to say, I only had a few weeks off when I had my daughter. And we were talking about a business thing, but it sort of, because of the way I was feeling, I suppose, emotionally, I remember saying very clearly, I've come back to work having had my daughter, and I don't really want to put work before my daughter. She's the most important thing for me. But what I've realised is that on the basis that I have to be here, it needs to mean something. I don't want to have to sacrifice time with my family if I'm just earning a living or just driving profit for someone else. I want it to be purposeful. And the thing that was really astonishing was that probably I was emotional too, but as I looked up and around the room, other people were in tears. It was quite clear that this was exactly how a load of people felt. And it was that moment, I think, that made me realise that actually human beings do need purpose. We spend so much of our lifetime at work. Let's make sure that we're doing good work and for good reasons. And I think that's what's driven me in terms of purpose. So, really important for me.
Wow. Well, a lovely story. Yeah, it made me feel a bit emotional listening to that. I've just had my first child, a daughter. She's 6 months old now.
Well, you understand what I mean then?
Oh, completely. Yeah, completely. So how did that change your decision-making process with career then, if that was your driving force from there?
Well, that is, I think, where your point about, all of my career has been an accident comes to play. I was talking to somebody about this slightly differently yesterday, that one of the things that I realise I've done over my life is I've always thought you have to take your opportunities, and if somebody offers you the chance to do something, you'd be foolish to turn it down. And I think, having told you one part of my story about my daughter, which was a difficult point, where I have been very lucky is that my husband did give up work and he's always been at home to look after the family. And actually my parents moved in, they're both dead now, sadly, but they moved in with us. In theory, so that we could look after them. But of course, it was great from my daughter's point of view because, it was nice to have that different generational approach. And I knew that she was being looked after by my mum as well as my husband. So I was super lucky in that sense. So I wasn't constrained, if that's the right way of putting it, in terms of taking on career opportunities, other than emotionally, because that always has continued to be a battle, I think. But as opportunities have presented themselves, I've always found that I've taken them. And the reason I was thinking about this yesterday was that many years ago, I was working for the company that's now called Aviva. It was called Norwich Union at the time. And I was an accountant. I trained as an accountant after I left uni. And I didn't like it very much, and I wasn't enjoying the area that I worked in. And my boss said to me, "Oh, you seem quite creative. Why don't you go and run the marketing department of our product range?" And I remember thinking about it over Christmas, actually, one Christmas, and thinking, do you know what? I never expected to go into marketing, but why not? I'm not thrilled with the job that I'm doing at the moment. It'll be different and exciting. I'll meet new people. And so I did it. And the person I was talking to yesterday was the person that was first offered that job all those years ago. And her name was Sally, and she's an actuary, continued to be an actuary. And she said, "Oh, when I was offered the job to move from being an actuary into marketing, I took a bit of offense at that because I was proud of having a professional qualification. And even now, I look back at it and think I made a mistake. I should have taken that opportunity." And she said it a lot over the years. And it's partly because she reminds me of that I have always thought, gosh, you get opportunities thrown at, we all get opportunities thrown at us. And sometimes it's easy to say no. Sometimes the harder thing is to say yes, actually. But I've almost always found that when you take your opportunities, good things come. In fact, I think I've always found that even if the thing itself isn't what you expect, it doesn't always work out. Goodness me, you learn some brilliant lessons from it. So I think that's why my career's been a series of accidents. People have said, "Why don't you just do this?" And I've gone, "Oh, all right then." And as a result, sort of the pathway has gone in different directions.
What if you were picking one? What would you say has been one of the biggest, or if it's a tipping point, or however you want to call it, what's been one of the biggest accidents or opportunities that present itself?
Oh, I think for me, it was buying Northern Rock when I was at
Mm.
Virgin Money. So, it was a very difficult career time for me. I had set up Virgin in financial services back in 1995. RBS actually had come along and acquired that business in, when would that have been? The early 2000s. And I went to RBS to run some of their traditional banking lines. And, for all of the current history with RBS that we all know about, learned a lot and met some very good people. But nevertheless, it was quite clear by 2006 that the culture there wasn't in a great shape. And two of my colleagues who continue to be with me even today, funnily enough, at the little fintech I've set up called Snoop, they were at RBS with me at the time. And I remember them coming into my room and saying, "We don't want to put up with this anymore." When we left Virgin, Richard Branson always said, "If you hate big company life, give me a call and you can come back." Call him. And I rang him, and timing was everything. They were looking for somebody else to lead the business that I'd set up. I was appointed straight away, and it was a big risk. I remember my mum saying to me, "Darling, what on earth are you doing? You're at this big blue chip company, RBS, and you're about to throw it all away and go to little tin pot Virgin Money. What are you doing that for?" And it felt scary. And it felt even scarier by the time I joined. We were in summer 2007, and we were going to set up a mortgage company, which meant that we needed finance from the capital markets. And I got a phone call saying, from the people that were going to support us, saying, "We can't support you anymore. The banking crisis is starting. We just don't have the cash to invest." And I thought, gosh, this is a terrible thing to have done, because I'm now in a place where I have not only put my own career in jeopardy, but a number of people have joined me at Virgin, and we haven't got business, we've got no money, we've got no anything. And it was not very much later than that, like 2 weeks later, 3 or 4 weeks later, that the press started to report on the collapse of Northern Rock, which was the bank in the northeast of England that was the first really evidence of the financial crisis that struck in 2008. And I remember going home after seeing those queues getting together and thinking, well, I ran mortgages at RBS, and Northern Rock's a mortgage bank, and the Northern Rock brand is now tarnished, and the Virgin brand's very strong, and we haven't got anything else to do, and we've got a lot of people that want to do it. Why don't we go and make a bid for Northern Rock? And I remember that night I wrote an email to about 50 people saying this, and 49 of them came straight back and said, "You're a complete idiot." And one came back and said, "What a brilliant idea, let's do it." And of course, my fortune was that one person was Richard Branson. Of course, what you find is that when rich, successful, and famous people say it's a good idea, miraculously, the other 49 change their mind. So we entered what for me was the sort of greatest adventure of my career, probably, which was at the beginning and at the height of the financial crisis, looking at what we could do to help to save part of the banking system and Northern Rock. And, much to my astonishment, I met people I never dreamt that I'd meet. Gordon Brown was Prime Minister at the time, met Alistair Darling, I met the Governor of the Bank of England, and it became, the thing that was really interesting to me was that I realised two important things that I've continued to realise are true. And one is that I'd always assumed that, the people in these really powerful jobs would be much, much cleverer than me. And I actually realised that we're all the same. We're all struggling to do the right thing at the right time to solve the problems that present themselves to us. And actually, my second point's in there as well, which is that, having read the press, I'd got the feeling that, all of these people wouldn't necessarily be looking to do the right thing. And I can tell you that throughout that crisis, I never met anybody of any political colour or any regulatory position that was trying to do anything other than what was right. And so I found it, amazing to have entered such an adventure and a privilege to meet people, and a real sort of encouragement that despite the way of the world broadly, in my experience, people have tried to do the right thing, and I've always found that super encouraging. And then I won't bore you with the entire Northern Rock adventure, but finally we acquired Northern Rock in 2012. So it was a sort of 4-year process to get to that place. But to move from setting a business up from literally nothing to acquiring a bank that came out of the financial crisis and then listing and then selling it has been, a real privilege to be part of that journey for a few years.
No, it sounds absolutely unbelievable. A couple of things just on the fact that people generally try to do well or do right is just such a nice thing, particularly in these times, to think that people are, and you have to assume that, right? Have faith in everyone that they are trying to do their best and they're trying to do what's right. And interesting, you mentioned as well that you have a perception of people in these big, powerful places that they know more than you. And I was exactly the same. I've been on this journey for over 3 years. This is I think this might be 105th episode I've spoke to.
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I spoke with sort of billionaires, professional athletes, all these people in the public eye, all these people you look at from the outside in. And yeah, when you sit down with them, including yourself, and speak with them, you just realize that everyone's just a human being on their own journey.
Yeah, I remember many years ago, lots and lots of years ago, watching a program about Elvis Presley, and it was called Cut Me and I Bleed. And I remember feeling at that point in time, I remember it registering, we put him on a pedestal, or he was put on a pedestal then, but he's just a human being like the rest of us. And of course, that's true of us all.
Yeah, it's amazing. Something that I picked up on when you were telling the story, particularly about the Northern Rock acquisition. You said that you sent an email, 49 people said no, one person said yes, the one who said yes was Richard Branson. What is it about both yourself and Richard Branson and other people who have achieved incredible things and changed the world or industries in various ways that is different to the 49 who said no? Is there like certain things about you and Richard and some other very successful people that you've noticed along your journey that's different when you're making big decisions like that or being courageous in moments like that?
I think that he would say that his sort of strap line for many years has been "Screw it, let's do it." And I would put it slightly differently, and he and I both sort of agree on this expression, I think, which is the answer is yes. Now, what's the question? So I think it's just, it's slightly mad, I suppose, to constantly say yes. And I must say, it has also got me into trouble on a number of occasions. And my team sort of shake their head in despair and go, "What on earth have you said yes to that for?" But I haven't really toned it down. It's partly the same as taking your opportunities, I think. I think it's just like, okay, somebody's asked me to do this crazy thing, or somebody's asked me to solve this problem. Well, let's assume we can do it and then find a way to do it. And I think that, as I say, there can be some negatives in that. But the thing that's positive is that there is always, in my experience, there's nearly always a way. And I'll tell another story about that, really, which is having already name dropped Richard Branson, who I worked for 25 years, so it's not entirely name dropping. We did work together for a very long time. He would, on most years, he would invite a bunch of people that ran the Virgin businesses to Necker Island, and he would do that in relatively small groups, and we'd all have the opportunity to talk about a whole range of different things. And a few years back, my husband and I were there, and much to our surprise, we were one of about, a dozen people, let's say, a couple of about a dozen people. The rest of whom largely included NASA scientists who were building Virgin Galactic, right? So I'm thinking, blimey, don't really know what's going on. Space is not my frontier, if you see what I mean. And we sat down one afternoon with a cup of tea, and I can see it now in a big room with, for some reason, a huge TV and snooker table in it, with all of the doors wide open, the sea outside. And Richard was talking about taking satellites into space, and that would be the way to commercialise. But at the time, this was an idea to commercialise Virgin Galactic. And these NASA scientists were saying, well, we can't work out how to get these satellites into space. And Richard said, I promise you I was there at the time. And Richard said, well, I tell you what, why don't we use some of the old 747s that are parked in the desert in America? Nobody's using them. Why don't we take 2 of the engines off, replace them with satellites? We could get up to, and again, forgive me, I don't know the technicalities, get up to the border of space, as it were, and drop them off the aeroplane. And these scientists, all of whom were experts, said, oh, it can't be done. And he kept saying, well, you're telling me it can't be done, but I'd really appreciate you just looking into it a bit more. And my husband and I, that night, I remember saying, gosh, that was a weird, crazy experience to be part of. How do you get satellites into space, sort of thing? And you may have noticed that last week, Virgin Orbit actually did it. And when I saw the pictures of it, I dropped Richard a note. And I said to him, I will always remember you asking the stupid question, and there it is now working. And he wrote back to me and said, I think we've always agreed you must always ask the stupid question. So, I was honestly there at the very beginning of that thought, and to see those satellites being attached to the underside of 747s as Virgin Orbit and, achieving what he just relatively casually said, why don't we just try this, was astonishing.
Wow. It's so strange. Well, not strange at all. It's amazing. I had Sir Clive Woodward on the podcast last week who said the same thing about asking stupid questions and not being afraid. And, you've obviously both achieved incredible things in your lives as well. I think what's great is that when you own something and you're steering something yourself, as Richard has, that you can be creative like that and just start to throw ideas about getting satellites into space in this case. But I'm interested to know, you mentioned as well earlier about corporate life and working for the big blue chips and how you've done both, actually. What's your feeling about the corporate world and people working in the corporate world? Because we talk a lot on here about how oftentimes it could be limiting. You could be restricted within certain roles and responsibilities and necessarily not be able to reach your full potential. But at times it offers fantastic opportunities at the same time. And it's a bit of a balancing act. So I'm interested to know from you, having been on both sides of it, what you think.
I've learned very much that there's nothing like setting up your own business. And so, my daughter's 18 and she's talking, I think she's just about to hopefully go to university at the end of this year. And then she's thinking about what does she do next. And I imagined as a mother, right, that I'd be encouraging her to go into a profession or think about, an industry that she might go into. And I'm saying to her, set up your own business. There's nothing like it. Think about, what you can do to create a business that's going to be one of, challenge and achievement. And I hadn't realized, I think, because I've been lucky through my life that I have had that freedom. The thing that's great about Virgin really is that, Richard has created an umbrella where individual people can develop their own businesses within that umbrella brand. Fantastic. And so I've sort of had the best of both worlds, which is some of the support of the mothership, for want of a better description, but actually the opportunity to build my own business and to forge a sort of entrepreneurial career. And really the same is true of Mark Benioff at Salesforce, I think. People refer to that as the biggest startup in the world ever. And I think that's right. It's still forging its own path and working out how to grow and growing hugely and very successfully as a result of the vision of, a handful of people really, led by one very visionary man. And so I think that it's definitely worth thinking. I would say to people, don't just get on the career ladder of a big organization because you think it's the thing to do. I would say look in yourself and think, what is it that I can do? Because particularly now with the world changing so much, and with technology providing so many, new avenues for people, I think the opportunity for change and innovation and development of new businesses is bigger than I've ever seen it, to be honest. And so I'd encourage people to take that opportunity if they want that. It is exposing. So for all of those reasons, when we finally sold Virgin Money and I left, I did set up my new fintech Snoop with a bunch of ex-friends and ex-colleagues and current friends, as opposed to ex-friends. And it's brilliant fun, but I'd sort of forgotten how hard it is. And so I think there's a bit of a balance there. You can have more structure, perhaps more balance in your life if you go and work at a big corporate. But if you want to do something for yourself, then you can. And if you're prepared to take the sort of workload that goes with that, then you can be super successful, I think.
Okay, I'm really pleased to hear that. I sometimes recognise in myself that I've got my own biases, and whether it's my personality or philosophies or even experiences that have led me to feel that way. And I know it's not for everyone, but yeah, I certainly feel the same as you. So okay, that's really good to hear.
Yeah, I think it's sometimes you need. I don't know if it's permission, but nobody ever said to me, "You can be an entrepreneur." I thought they were a sort of different breed, and they're not. It's just us setting up a business to do things that we think can make a difference in the world, and that's great.
Well, how would you advise people to get past the sort of self-doubt and any of that, like, limitations psychologically before they take action?
I don't know, because I still struggle with that. And, particularly during lockdown, I found more self-doubt, more psychological limitations. I've had to, I think every morning about, well, sorry, I suppose the best way of putting it is I know that my mental health isn't as good in lockdown as it is in the normal world. And that's because, much as I enjoy speaking like this with you on Zoom, I know that as an individual, my thing is being with people. And I've been lucky during lockdown in many, many ways. And the fact that we are having this sort of, engagement is brilliant compared to what some people are getting, I know. But I've really missed that. And I know my thinking comes from chatting to people and going, what do you think about this thing? And you don't really have that on Zoom, because those conversations, I think, happen when you walk out of the building, or, go down the pub or have a coffee together, or even meet in the loo or something, And I think I miss that a lot. So anyway, so what I've tried to do in lockdown, which I have found has helped, it hasn't solved the problem because I know it's still there, but the way in which I manage it, frankly, is, and I'm not necessarily built to do this, I go for a run every morning. So I've run about 10K every morning. And if I miss it, because what it's meant is that I've forced myself as far as possible not to start before 10:30, completely unheard of in my life. But I try not to put anything in before 10:30, so I've got time to get out, particularly on a darker morning, and come home and have a shower before I start. 10K, I'm afraid takes me about an hour and a quarter. So as you can see, it's not really a run; it's a plod. But when I come back, I feel better for the fresh air, better for the headspace, and I've listened to some really good podcasts, and I found that has been something that's really helped me in a way that I hadn't experienced when I was in my everybody's normal working life.
That's so good to hear.
We all have to work out what works for us in that way, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think exercise is one that can hopefully help across the board with people, just the endorphins and everything else that's released that can help with our mental health. Jayne, if you're happy speaking about it, would you share a little bit more about, you mentioned your postnatal depression and how you got past that and how you kind of, I suppose, managed it while you were working at the same time?
I think the conversation about mental health at the moment is right and good and interesting. And I think when I started to talk about it, I hadn't realised that it was something that was still a taboo. And so people would say to me, gosh, you're talking about postnatal depression, and it's brilliant to hear from me, because we don't hear it from other business leaders. And I hadn't properly realised that was the case. And I do think you're right to ask the question of lots of people, Mark, and because I think we all suffer from it, right? And I'm sure he wouldn't mind me saying. Well, I won't say his name. Actually, there's another banker, a male banker, who has talked about his mental health. And funny enough, we talked about exercise. I remember his wife wanted to run the London Marathon, and we were talking about it. And I said to him, "Don't you want to run it?" And he said, "Oh no, running's not my thing." So I've realised that my thing is tennis. And I said, "Oh, why is that?" And he said, "Because I can't think about anything else while I'm playing tennis, and I need to not be able to think in order to manage my stress." And I thought, how brilliant that he and I are having this conversation about mental health sort of thing. And the reason that I think it's important, Mark, is that I don't think that I know, as I've just said, that this isn't something that people conquer. I think it's something that you have to learn to live with and manage and sort out. How we can each manage the anxiety. I suffer definitely from anxiety that we have to deal with each day because of our interaction with the world, and in particular the world of work. And in the end, I suppose, what I find is that the thing I struggle with a lot is I'm not sure whether I really am a pain in the arse, or whether how can I put it? People accuse others of being a pain in the arse when they don't agree with them. If you see what I mean. And by the by, I think it's particularly interesting, and I know there's all sorts of examples one way or the other, that women are deemed to be difficult when in certain situations, when I think that in similar situations and similar behaviours, men would be deemed to be assertive. And so I deal quite a lot with, are the challenges that I make of people and the world and issues, am I being difficult? I don't think I am, right? But people sometimes often come back and say, why have you decided to fight that particular battle? And I really struggle with that, because from within myself, I think, well, all I'm doing is trying to create something that's better and challenge things that are going on. And why is that difficult? And the only way that I deal with that, really, and I do it almost every night now, because I think these issues arise quite a lot, is to properly think, what are you doing at the moment? Are you doing it for the right reasons? Is this a battle or a war? Because lots of people say to me, you tend to fight battles, and why don't you let that go and fight a war instead? And sometimes I'll wake up the next morning and think, just let that go. And other times, more often than not, actually, I'll wake up and think, no, it's the right thing to do, push on. And that's the way that I've been able to deal with things, I think, over my career. And you're asking me to reflect on something that I haven't particularly articulated previously, and that's always challenging. But I think that we can be unnecessarily negative to people that are trying to do the right thing. And if you are trying to do the right thing and you believe in yourself it's right, then I think you help your own mind to understand it, and then you have to push on, or you're giving way to people that want to often have not the same reasons for doing what you're trying to achieve. Sorry, I've said that in a muddled way. I hope I've made sense.
No, it makes complete sense. It's really fascinating and thank you, by the way, for sharing. It's really great to hear. I think it's fascinating. You've almost used, although you seem like an extrovert, I'm assuming that you are. I've seen you speak and you're incredible. Are you extroverted?
Well, it's funny that you should say that. I think I present as an extrovert, but I live as an introvert, I think.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, to sit quietly each evening and kind of think with yourself, that's quite an introverted thing to do.
Yeah. But that, and I think that this is what I'm saying about needing people, because I'm able to. You probably saw me speak in groups of, I don't know, quite a large number of people, and I like that. I feed off that, and it definitely makes me able to speak better. If you see what I mean, I like it. It encourages thought and etc. But I'm an only child, and so I'm equally happy with my own company, and I do definitely, explore myself, as it were. But when I'm on my own.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, when we talk about mental health and really what it is personal development or self-help, and that can be a big banner of a category as well. I've done everything under the sun to try and get better performance-wise, but also really what it comes down to underneath the surface is just to feel, I suppose, happy in yourself. And
to feel free in your head, if that makes sense. The thing that I struggle with a lot is that if I have an issue that I'm stressed or anxious about, it sort of dominates my thoughts. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's when I know that I've got to deal with it. And that's when I think, right, well, this particular thing is the thing that keeps on popping up, and irritatingly in my mind. Okay, I better sit down and deal with it. I better think it through, write it through, make some phone calls and sort it out. And then I can't properly rest until I've sorted it. And then I like it because my head feels clear again. Does that make any sense?
Completely, yeah. Better than burying it under the surface, isn't it? Addressing it there and then, really.
Yeah.
I wonder whether detaching from those things helps as well. Like I think what I struggled with a little bit in being in the corporate world is being labelled as a salesperson, or in your case, labelled as, Jayne and the CEO. Do you do anything to and maybe it's the same practice, right, of having that thought process in the evening? Do you do anything to detach from that and just remember who you are without all the labels and all the stuff that happens in the external world?
I think that I'm more surprised to be Jayne and the CEO than to be the normal person, if you see what I mean. Genuinely, I remember years ago, I was working out of Norwich, and I used to fly up to Edinburgh to see RBS as we were starting to work together. And I'd do a lot of hanging around whilst I was waiting to see the sort of senior people at RBS. And the people that I'd talked to were, the sort of security men, and there was somebody that used to pick me up at the airport and whatever. And when we did this particular deal together where Virgin and RBS launched a banking product, we had a celebration and dinner up in Edinburgh. And I'd invited all of the people that I thought had been really helpful to me during this process. And I remember my boss at the time, or the guy that was my boss at RBS, Norman McCluskey, saying, "Who are all these people at this dinner? You've got the porters and the security guards. You should be celebrating with the important people." And I promise you, it hadn't really occurred to me. I just looked at who were the people that had made a difference to me. And actually, the porters and the security guards were had much more impact than the most senior people. And I also felt, and I've mentioned it earlier, that actually, as a CEO, you're told what people want you to hear rather than what's really going on. And I'd always prefer to, I'd always know what was going on at Virgin Money by popping to the loo, because I'd always find people in there in tears or or happy or whatever, because that's where they would talk to each other about what was really going on. And so I think that and by the by, I've got a husband who the fact that he's Indian is probably irrelevant to this point, but he has never been impressed by anything in my career. And the only thing that he's really interested in is, can he watch the cricket and the football? Is there a beach nearby? And can he play tennis or whatever, or kick a ball about? And he's never been particularly. If I came home and said I've been fired, he'd have gone, "Thank goodness for that. Let's find a hammock somewhere and go and tour the world." So I think I'm definitely Jayne Am first and a surprise CEO.
He keeps you grounded, does he?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. I wonder what that conversation was like when the two of you had your daughter and decided that you were going to be the one to carry on working. Was that a difficult conversation to have?
No, it was an easy conversation before she was born, because it was unemotional and practical, right? And then, of course, after she was born, we realised that actually I wanted to be at home looking after the baby, and he hadn't realised how hard it would be to give up work. He had been at work. So the challenge came when you actually inserted the baby into the process. But anyway, we dealt with it.
Oh, brilliant. You mentioned, or we both spoke a little bit about your talks that you've done, and as I said, it was amazing. I loved watching you talk, and you've done so many great things in your career. Even selling Virgin Money for the huge amount that you sold it for. So I imagine there are large meetings and sales pitches, and in a sense, they're performances in a different way to like an athlete or something like that, but they're still performances. So I wonder whether there's things that you do before you go into a meeting room, or before you go into a pitch, or before you deliver a talk. Like, do you do anything to get yourself in the right headspace?
Perhaps not entirely as you mean, but two things pop into my mind. So one was that many years ago, as I set up, there was a business I set up called the Virgin One Account, which is the first banking business that I'd set up. And it had the main competitor was a company called Intelligent Finance. And I think, although I'm not entirely sure if I'm about to say the right name now, but I think it had been set up and run by a guy called Peter Wood, who has also been super successful. He's in ways other than Intelligent Finance. And I found myself being invited to London to the very posh Savoy Hotel to be on stage with, as I say, I think it was Peter. Apologies to Peter if it wasn't him and it was somebody else. But anyway, let's call him Peter for now. And I was nervous about it. And I remember being sort of get myself ready in the bathroom before going on stage. And actually, I was so nervous, actually drawing myself up to my full height, which is, I'm 6'2", so that's quite a challenge. And saying to myself, "Come on, girl, you're going to have to get out there and do this. You can do this." It was the first time I'd ever spoken to myself out loud to do it. That was the first thing, and occasionally I do that. But the second thing is that if I'm particularly nervous, there is a particular story that I tell, and I start off by telling it. I don't know if I've told it when you've heard it, and it's let me see if I can remember it off the cuff. It was the story of the two girls who are walking in the wood, and as they walk in the wood, they see a frog sitting on the log, and as they walk by the frog says, "Psst, come over here." And the two girls look at each other in surprise and go over to the frog, and the frog says, "Pick me up and give me a kiss, and I will turn into the CEO of Virgin Money." And quick as a flash, one of the girls picks up the frog and shoves him into her handbag. And the other girl says, "What'd you do that for?" And the first girl says, "Well, I reckon a talking frog's far more valuable than the CEO of Virgin Money." And the thing that's good about it is that it always used to make people laugh. And in making people laugh, I had controlled my voice, because if you're nervous, your breathing's funny and you slightly get the crowd on side. And so my advice for anybody is, if you've got a story that can do something like that, it's worked for me. And if you want to copy that story, then there it is for you.
Oh, that's so good. Do you know what? I've said it so many times before that's what makes it easier for me. You try and get a laugh, and I know we
Yeah.
should try and not seek external validation, but we do. So if you get that kind of feedback straight away, it's like, oh, okay, cool. Right, let's go.
Exactly.
Oh, that's brilliant. What about when, did you have to sell the deal to Richard Branson to get the bank going, or what was that conversation like?
Originally,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think probably the conversation that was most interesting, or at least the one that pops in my mind as you asked the question, with Richard, was that when we did acquire Northern Rock, to build on that story, the thing that he was most concerned about was, could we do it properly? And his point was, it's all very well to have, I don't know, a cosmetics company called Virgin. If that goes bust, it doesn't worry anybody. But if you've got a bank called Virgin and you were to go bust, then that could bring the whole thing crumbling down.
Mm.
And so I remember him saying, this needs to be focused on customer service. It needs to be low risk. It needs to be done properly, no corners cut. And I think for him, probably, it was the first time as an entrepreneur he had been properly focused on, as I say, this being a low risk business. And yeah, that was the thing, I think, to persuade him of. On the other hand, I do remember at the very, very beginning, we're going back to the 1995 type setup now. In order to start Virgin in financial services initially, of course, we needed a regulatory license. And it was such a long time ago that the regulators have changed since then. But one particular regulator was the Investment Managers Regulatory Organisation called IMRO, and it's now part of the FCA, I presume. And I had to go and see IMRO, and the people there said, Richard Branson, he runs an airline and a record company, and he's flighty. Why on earth is he the sort of person that could run a financial services company? And I came back and told Richard that that's what he'd said. And he said, well, put it this way. There's no more highly regulated business than an airline. People wouldn't get on my planes if they didn't think they'd get off the other end. And I remember telling the financial regulators that, and them saying, do you know what? Never thought about it quite like that. Actually, you can be exciting in a Richard Branson sort of way, but you've still got to do things properly. And I think that's it, really. I think that he's always said, let's all have a bit of fun, but let's do things properly.
Mm. Oh, that's superb. I love hearing that story. We've got about 4 minutes here left. So I really want to touch on some of your experience as a leader. And for people who are aspiring leaders, or perhaps they're in leadership roles already, what sort of advice would you give them? I've heard you say, obviously you've done great things for equality in business. And I heard you talk about how perhaps the thing that separated you from other female leaders is that you were prepared to bang your fist on the desk a little bit and demand those bonuses or demand that recognition. So just keen to hear your advice for people who are either leaders or aspiring leaders, and what they can do to dream of reaching the sort of success you've had.
Um, Gosh, I mean, that's a difficult question, Mark. I mean, I think that don't take no for an answer would be one of the things that I'd say. Make sure you've got great people around you because none of us can do anything on our own. I would say be really clear what you're trying to achieve because if you don't know where your goal is, you can be sure you're not going to hit it. All of
Mm.
those sort of things. And then I think know what you stand for. I do think that it's important to have that we all know what our values are, and I don't mean in a big company way, work them out in some sort of consultancy session and stick them up on the wall,
Yeah.
but because I think that's actually very counter good leadership. But I do think it's important that as I said at the very outset, when we spend so much time at work, I think it's important to test out, is this an organisation whose values I can share and contribute to? And if, as a leader, you have a whole bunch of people that are working in an organisation that can state what their values are and live them, then it's really powerful. So the thing, perhaps to try and tell another story that worked at Virgin Money, was that we started off back in, it was when I came back to Virgin actually, so let's call it must have been 2007, thinking about what is the purpose of Virgin Money. And to start with, we thought it was a marketing campaign that we'd come up with, and we said what we want to do is we want to make everyone better off. We're a bank and we want to do something that makes people feel better off, because banks are about money but they don't make people feel better off. And as we started to develop it, we realized it wasn't a marketing campaign, it was a proper corporate ambition that we all believed in. And the idea behind everyone's better off, or of course it was shortened to the 3-letter acronym EBO, that what EBO meant was we wanted to drive profit for shareholders, good careers for colleagues, if you like, wanted to do something good in our communities, we wanted to have win-win relationships with partners, and we wanted to have great customer relationships. So 5 big things that meant that everyone's better off worked. And the reason that was so powerful, Mark, was that every time that we did a new product or made a new acquisition or made a decision, what we'd say to people was, is it EBO?
Mm.
Are you really making a decision that is right for everyone here? And I remember, a very, very small example that I've always loved is that we had a small branch network at Virgin Money in my day, and one of them was run by a woman in Dorking whose name was Doreen. And Doreen would write to me every so often as the branch manager at Dorking. And she said, "This is your report from Doreen's Dorking Diamonds." And on this one particular occasion, she said, "We've been thinking about EBO and it's the summer, and we've turned the branch into a geranium exchange. The people in the town come in, they bring their plants, and we put them on the pavement outside the branch, and you can take one and bring one, and everybody's loving it." And I did think to myself, what on earth has Virgin Money got to do with geraniums? It was completely bonkers. But as I read on, she said, because for us, this is EBO, and it's brought in people that want to talk about it. It's created different fun. We've had fun thinking about how to make it work, etc. And I thought, you know what? The thing that's so powerful about that is that it might not be what I do, but I can understand that it's EBO and it's what she would do to lead her team. And so what she'd done was to say, I really like this, making everyone's better off. Let me work out what it means for me. Then I can run my team with integrity and be part of corporate values. And I think that for me, that's the strongest example I can give of effective leadership, not just from one person at the CEO level, but a set of corporate values that enables everyone to lead. And I think that can be very powerful.
Wow. So she had the autonomy to really take that value, that EBO, to wherever she wanted to take it, really.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Brilliant. Okay. We've just run out of time. We do the same 3 questions at the end of every episode. They're quick fire. Have you got 1 minute just to fire through? All right,
Yep.
great. So these are tangible piece of advice you'd offer to listeners for them to take away and take into their lives. So the first one is there anything you're particularly excited about that you've discovered or come across recently?
Vegan chocolate.
Oh yes, good one. It's nice.
I wouldn't have tried that without my daughter who wants to be vegan, and good Lord, they're delicious.
Yeah, that's a great one. I've had it before as well. Surprisingly good.
Yeah.
The next one is, if you had to offer all listeners one habit to add to their day, what would it be? And that's going to drive their performance. What would it be?
Go for a run.
Nice. And
However slow. I'm very slow, but
yeah. And 10K or any distance?
any distance. Just
Okay,
get out there, and you'll get fitter and better, ever so quickly.
great. And the last one is, if you had to nail it down to one trait within you that's allowed you to reach the heights that you've reached, what is that one trait?
Never take no for an answer.
Brilliant. Jayne, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mark. Been lovely to talk with you. Thank you.